This episode discusses sensitive topics, including suicide. If you or someone you know is struggling, help is available. Call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org or call 1-855-771-HELP. Please take care while listening.
As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. Hey, I'm Ted Lowe, and I'm the host of the All Pro Dad Podcast, where each week we take a look at just one question. We talk about what we've gotten wrong mostly, sometimes what we've gotten right, what the experts say, and we leave you with just one simple but powerful pro move. And today I'm very excited to be joined by my co-host, Mr. BJ Foster.
Hey, Ted.
Glad you're here. And Mr.
Thank
Bobby
you.
Lewis. Glad you're here. Hey, our big question of the week is, what are some dangerous thoughts that kids battle? What are some dangerous thoughts, is so important, that kids battle?
And I want to ask you guys, and everyone at home as well, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, I want to ask you, think this over. What dangerous thought that you maybe had as a kid, which one do you think you'd love to just rewind the clock, take it away as if it never happened?
Wow, there were so many, and I'm not even teasing about that. There were just so many. I think probably your worth comes from outside.
Exterior.
Yeah, it's this constant, do they like you? Do they like you? And do whatever it takes to make them like you. And it didn't matter who it was. And I got really good at it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think mine would be, no girl will ever want to date you ever, which was almost true. So, in fact, a girl even said that to me one time. No one will date you ever.
Yeah. Did she?
No, she did not.
No.
She did not. Man. No, but I had just said something rude to her.
Well, maybe you did.
So yeah, I mean, it was justified. It's one of those that, like, I almost kind of feel like, does God, when he creates some people, just kind of be like, this one, it's going to be a lower percentage of people that are going to get this person, or like be able to deal with it. Like, I'm going to take some filters away from this guy and watch what happens.
Yeah. Some filters.
Yeah. So that's kind of what it was.
That's funny.
Yeah.
For me, I have made peace with my lanky frame. But when I was much younger, I did not have so much peace about it. I was constantly thinking, you're not strong enough. You're not big enough. It's just the comparison thing. I had teammates on different sports that were just big, strong guys. And I just thought, you're never good enough. You're never big enough. You can't achieve because you're not strong enough. And I only kind of think that now. So that's good.
I don't think you're lanky though now. I think you're just tall.
Well, I don't know. I graduated high school 6'3", 145 pounds.
Okay, that's lanky.
So I've gained 50 whatever pounds. Like I've gained weight as I gotten older, but I was thin, dude. Was
that something that kids teased you about?
My high school basketball coach teased me about it because we were doing like shirts and skins. He's like, all right, shirts, skin. I took my shirt off. He goes, put your shirt back on.
Wow.
I was like, oh, dang. Thanks, coach. Thanks a lot. I'm like, he's like, you just go to the weight room. The rest of you can play basketball.
I feel like that's what high school coaches are like, rough, the meanest people.
Rough. Yeah. Oh, my dangerous thoughts came from that guy.
But they keep the counseling world in business, right?
It's
I
great.
remember when my coach said.
Yeah.
I mean, wonder how many counseling sessions start with that. I remember when my coach said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I wonder what people at home would say, because, we have, kind of a variety of answers. But I wonder if you're a dad listening, did you have those same sort of thoughts? I think everybody kind of does. In fact, every kid at some point has a dangerous thought that they're battling. And we kind of joke about it now because we're adults. But our kids now, they haven't matured to the point where they can look at it and say, it's kind of funny. Now we laugh about it now. You weren't super strong, whatever. They're in the thick of it now. And those dangerous thoughts, they stew all day long. And that's tough for kids.
Absolutely. It's painful for kids.
Yeah, BJ, you wrote a really popular article for allprodad.com, 5 negative thoughts that are dangerous for kids. Here's the 5 points. I thought they're great. Number 1, nobody likes me. Huge one. You said that. Nobody likes me. Very popular one. Number 2, I don't like myself. Rough, right? Number 3, I wish I was different. I think a lot of kids probably feel that at some point in their life. Number 4, I'm so stupid. Number 5, I can't do it. 5 dangerous thoughts. And there's probably plenty more. BJ, why do you think it's so easy for kids to have these dangerous thoughts that just run around their head?
Well, I think number one, they don't know who they are yet. And so they're getting all these messages. Like they're getting more messaging than we ever got as kids. So you've got multimedia, You've got all the social messages that they're getting at school. You're getting social media messages. It never turns off. And so if they see, I don't look the same as somebody who's getting the attention, like even just in their class, someone's getting attention, they're not. They pick up stuff, particularly I think girls pick up. The girls are like, they have these hypersensitivities where they just pick up everything that's being communicated to them. And so, they don't feel like people respond to them in a positive way, then they immediately kind of think, oh, I wish I was different. I wish I was that person over there. I'm awkward. I must be ugly. I must be off-putting.
You mentioned social media. That's the first thing that jumps out in my mind. It's like a comparison tool, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, it doesn't matter. You pick your social media platform. Every one of them sets you up to be compared to someone else. And not even necessarily with images, but even just the simple number of likes.
Yeah.
Your daughter posts a picture, my daughter posts the exact same picture. Your daughter gets 40 likes, my daughter gets 6. My daughter thinks she's crap. And you're like, no, it's exactly the same thing. It's just maybe you had different interactions, maybe your friends had the time to look. But in her mind, she doesn't know the external elements and the variables. She just knows, I only got 6 people that said they liked my picture. BJ's daughter had 40. I must not be good enough. I must not be popular. I must not be pretty, whatever, and that's tough.
My daughter all of a sudden, she started doing her makeup, like really weird around her eyes. And my wife and I are going, what's happening? Like, what are we doing here? Because it wasn't like her. It didn't look like her clothes. It didn't look like anything. Yeah. I mean, it was just all this strange eye makeup. And we're like, what is happening? We learned later that some kid says your eyes look like they're bugging out of your head. And for her, she was doing everything possible with makeup because she had that thought in her head, my eyes bug out, which ironically is probably the prettiest thing about her, big blue eyes. And so I just have so much heartache for kids right now, and boys and girls, about what they're hearing.
Yeah. Well, and what made each one of these in particularly, why I labeled it dangerous, is because each one of those things, it's a rejection of their identity in some way.
Yeah.
It's, I should be different. No one likes me. I don't like me. Like there's a rejection, like what you were saying. I've embraced this thing. Now yours was a physical thing, but like our kids need to embrace who they are.
What I think stinks about this particular list too, it's a good list. These 5 things, no one likes me. I don't like myself. I wish I was different. I'm so stupid. I can't do it. Is that nothing says they can't think all 5 at the same time.
Sure.
You might just think one of those things. I can't do it. Okay, you're struggling today with math test or whatever. I can't do it. But when you couple that with a second dangerous thought and a third dangerous thought and a fourth and a 50th dangerous thought, all of a sudden it's an avalanche in your brain and you don't know who you are. Like you said, your identity is in question. I don't know. I can't tell sometimes when I'm looking at my teenage daughter, like, how many dangerous thoughts are you having right now? Is it 1? Is it 20? I don't know. And that's hard. And that's where we come in as dads. We really got to prompt them and get to know and dig down deep to find out. Because I don't think they're going to volunteer that information up very often.
You are 100% correct on that.
Like your daughter with the eyes. Like she didn't come to you and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to change my eye makeup because someone said my eyes are buggy. Like she didn't say it. You had to figure it out. You had to put the clues together, and that makes it tough.
Right. And we didn't have the conversation because we've let our kids have freedom on those kind of things. That's their life. That's makeup. I'm not going to have an opinion about that. My wife's decided that she's not. But just to dig in, as we're saying this, I'm like, dads, we've got to dive into their lives and talk to them about this.
So question for you, both of you, because you have teenage daughters as well. Where is the line? Because you see the change in behavior with your daughter. She changes her makeup, kind of a out of the blue thing. Where's the line for dads? Are we prying into their privacy, or are we just noticing something different and become curious about it? And really, maybe this is the first step into solving a problem for them. Where's the line?
Yeah, I don't have a line in terms of asking questions and wanting to know them and wanting to know what's going on, particularly when I see big behavioral changes. I mean, I would say ask your kids. Absolutely. Now, grilling them.
Yeah.
there's big things with tone, like, what are you doing? Why are you putting that makeup on? That's, hey, I noticed you did something different with your eyes. What's
cool.
going on?
Yeah.
And so, or even something like, gosh, it looks like you're putting makeup around. I've always loved your eyes. Like, what are you trying to draw attention? Asking those questions, getting it out of them. Here's the reality. If they want to hide something from you, they'll hide it.
Sure.
But you always ask the question. It's just be mindful of your tone. Be mindful of how you do it. Be mindful that they are at a precarious place in life where there's constant messaging coming at them. They don't know who they are. It's like walking around on an earthquake and trying to figure out life. Just be very empathetic and be there.
And this was a question that we had to kind of go. I went through mom on this one. I have to be, you talk about a girl's appearance as a dad. Hey, what's up with your makeup? Like, I had to go through my wife for this one.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, and again, they're loaded up, but they're so self-conscious about that. So you do have to be careful when you're asking them, that they feel like you're asking questions and not questioning.
So we've been doing this podcast for well over a year now, and I've heard you say one phrase in particular that seems to come up often. It's Fred in your head. I know that's your favorite phrase. That has a lot to do with this with kids, because these dangerous thoughts, that's the Fred in their head, the stuff they're battling, right?
Absolutely. I wrote a marriage book called Us and Mine, and it talks about thoughts and the power of them in your marriage, but they're also very powerful as individuals. In fact, there's a whole chapter about what do you think about yourself, because how you think about yourself is going to radically impact everything as a dad, as a husband. But what we've done lately is we've tried to transition this as a family to help our kids with their own negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And so on dads, here's a little thing that we've done that, it's backed by research too. So it's not something we made up. It's based off ANTS, which is automatic negative thoughts. But we changed it a little bit to hopefully help kids to understand it. Adults to understand. I call them Fred in your head. I think every kid can resonate with thoughts going on in their head. And so you say, hey, name your Fred. My daughter's name is Teddy, so she calls hers Freddie. So you get them to name it. And what that does is it separates their thoughts from them. It puts a little humor on it, which is always a good thing. But it's like, wow, there is something outside of me that is saying to this. And it gives them agency, and it gives them more control to start thinking about this. Okay, I'm going to give this voice a name. So that's kind of fun. What's the thought in your head? And then you have them to write it out. Neurologically, when they write it out and they see it, sometimes, and this is true for us, you can see how ridiculous these things can be. And you start to challenge in that, and you sit down with your kids and say, hey, let's talk about this. Like, write this down. I want to see this. And eventually want them to do it by themselves, obviously. But to start seeing this in front of them say, nobody, like, I'm thinking about these thoughts. No one likes me. Okay. You say no one likes you. Do you think that's true, that no one likes you? I like you. Well, you're my dad. You have to like me. Mom likes you. Well, she's my mom. You have to like me. And then you start going, well, your friend's over all the time, and I'm pretty sure that she loves you. And you start unpacking that a little bit. And then you can talk about not trying to be a people pleaser, but them to see these comments and them to see it in front of them. It's a powerful thing. The other part of this is you break it down in terms of what I call categories. I say Fred has a lot of side hustles. So it's fortune telling. The fortune teller says, hey, I'm going to fail this test. I'm not going to have any friends by the end of the year. I am. And they have all those negative thoughts.
Projecting.
They're projecting, and they're going, hey, so we can tell our kids, you can't predict the future. I can't predict the future. You're not a fortune teller. So that's a great thing, is you're not a fortune teller. So we know that could happen, maybe, but we don't know for certain that that's true. And that's the other thing, getting them to the point of saying, hey, is this true? Is there a way that I can prove that it's true?
Yeah.
And then you can move on from that.
I've noticed that with some of our kids is that they automatically go to the worst possible outcome. We have, flat tire. Okay, the worst possible outcome is we have a flat tire now. We're going to get creamed by a semi-truck and we're all going to be, dead in 5 minutes. Or we just change the tire and we go home. But it's the worst possible outcome of the situation. And I find that kids tend to get there faster than me. I'm not saying I never have those sort of thoughts this catastrophe, what could happen? But kids, it's almost like a reflex, at least for my kids. And I'm sure a lot of kids are that way. It's, oh my gosh, 0 to 60, we're not 0 to 60, they're 0 to 100. They're there as fast as possible.
So all your kids?
No, not all of them, but my teenager for sure. The younger kids, they're kind of in blissful, just la la land half the time. But my older children, yeah, for sure. They're like, oh man, I sent a text to my friend, but they haven't texted me back in an hour. They must hate me. I'm like, maybe they're busy. It's okay.
Right.
But it's that worst possible scenario. It's boom, instant. And it's tough. It's tough to kind of pull them back from the edge, Do
you feel like your teenagers do that, BJ, when they're talking about things in the future?
No, I think my kids are weird that way. No, I do think that's
common,
kind of the norm. My teens are I think kind of strangely confident. It's a little bit weird.
That's great.
So
but you guys have been
maybe cut this part out.
No, you and Elizabeth have been so intentional about that.
I don't think that's the case. It's
well, but that's just saying that they maybe don't struggle with that particular thought.
Yeah.
But kids struggle with all sorts of things. They may be more confident than the average teenager, but they may struggle in other areas. You know? And then you got to pull them back from that ledge.
Yeah. Well, my son in particular, he's I don't know where he learned this, but he's very what's called self-effacing. Yeah. I don't know where he got that.
I think you said before we started recording, I hate my voice.
I do. So does the crowd. So he does stuff like that all the time. And it was, I think we had to tell stop ripping yourself so much, and so it's a defense. It's a defense mechanism. Yeah. If I rip myself more than anyone else,
I'll beat you to the punch.
Yeah, I beat you to the punch. I took the teeth out of your mouth before you could bite me. And so, so I say that, it's all there.
Well, and another one that we'll hear, and adults, again, do this. We do this too, is the labeling I'm so stupid. Mm-hmm. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a moron. Yeah. I'm such a goofball. It's somebody with ADHD, and it's not like, hey, I got ADHD, full on, I had it before it was cool to have it, before it was a thing, when it was labeled sit down, shut up. Yeah. But what your brain starts to tell you is that you're stupid. Mm-hmm. Who does this sort of thing? Stupid people. How could you forget this? And adults can ask you, what were you thinking? You're like, I wasn't thinking anything, not one thing before I did that. And so, but you'll watch kids and adults. Yeah. They'll say, I'm such a goofball. I'm so stupid. And that's where Fred gets really, really obvious.
Here's what we do with my son, because my son's 9 and he is probably dyslexic. We don't know for sure. But and we started seeing the signs. He would write B as D or D as B, or he'd write S backwards or R, and he'd do these things backwards. And my mom has been working with dyslexic students for a long, long time. That's her expertise. And she's looking at him. She goes, yeah, that's a little sign here. There's a sign there. Maybe dysgraphia, other things like that. And it's very popular with a lot of kids, very common thing. And so what we've done with him, whenever he gets in that mode where he's like, I just can't do it, or I'm just so dumb. It's like, no, this is just hard for you. That doesn't mean you're dumb. That just means that this is difficult and we can do hard things. Mm-hmm. So let's work and do hard things, and then remind him, hey, maybe English is a little bit harder for you, but you're a whiz at math, dude. You are so good at math. And I am so impressed by how quickly you do the math in his head, which is wild. We'll give him a multiplication problem, and he just looks at it and goes, 87. I'm like, how in the world? Didn't have to write it down or anything, but the letters are hard. And so when we get to those situations where he's telling himself, I'm just stupid, I just can't do it, we're like, you can, and let me help you. We're going to do it together. And remember how good you are at all these other things. Just because you maybe struggle in one area doesn't mean that you're not capable in all these other areas. And hopefully that kind of boosts his confidence a little bit to give him that motivation to go after the hard stuff. Because it's not like this is the only hard thing he's ever going to face in life. You got to figure it out.
So that's one of those things. I love that, Bobby. I love that you're saying, hey, this is a struggle, but this is a strength.
That's part of the application, to get him to think past the thought, because we can't prevent the thoughts. It'd be great if we could, but we can't prevent them. But what we can do is recognize them and then help them move past those thoughts into something better.
Well, and that's the last part of, the thing is first, name your Fred, write your thoughts, categorize them. The last one is talk back. I'm a Christian, and so we've taught our kids that, what would God say back to you? Ant's therapy would say, hey, talk back and how you would talk to a friend. But, what we'll tell our kids, would God call you an idiot? Would Abba Father call you an idiot? Would say you're stupid, say no one likes you. And so we've challenged that way. Just depending on where your kids are, faith can be a little tricky thing with teenagers, but I think just going, hey, how would you talk back to a friend?
Yeah.
Talk back to a friend. So that kind of helps to, again, feels like we've talked about that a couple times. It gets it out.
It's interesting. One of our writers on iMom, Lisa Rowell, her daughter was trashing herself one day, and she said, "Shut up." She was like, "Do not talk about my daughter that way." And it was, just kind of an interesting, she's like, "I'm going to speak directly to the, internal voice that is kind of coming after it." Yeah. I mean, it's great. I think one of the things that's super important to think about is when you hear your kid trashing themselves, it's so easy to kind of like, I'm going to shut that. The thought process is, I'm going to shut that down. No, you're not. You are not. You're the best. Everybody loves you. And in that way, they kind of gloss over the hurt that has taken place, the things. And so I think it's important to just kind of say, hey, to listen, to sit in the pain, to mourn with them a little bit, and just be there. And then you kind of earn a right to then say, all right, let me ask you now, do you think this is true? I do think you have to earn your way in to the heart. And when you're there, you need to realize that you're on holy ground. So you need to walk, but we go so quickly to try to put a silver lining on everything. And then we throw at them inauthentic compliments. It's like, no, you're the best. Everybody loves you. Well, they probably don't. That's okay. Here's the thing. That's all right.
Yeah.
Well, in the middle of their emotions, it's not the time to do, Fred in your head. They're working out the emotional part of their brain. This takes some logical part of their brain, and they can't do it. So that's a great point. Like you said, sitting in the pain with them and making safe. Yeah. Hey, in terms of application, moving, what do we do in light of all these negative thoughts with our kids? I think first and foremost, we got to be safe. Like BJ's saying, we've got to be safe. They can feel comfortable telling us their emotion. And I think part of that, to your point, is not immediately going to answers, not immediately glossing it over, not immediately give wide sweeping statements. We tell our kid, no, you're the best baseball player in the world. No, they're not. They're not best baseball player, on their team. Right. But just say those big sweeping things, but we got to be safe.
Yeah. Don't be here's the thing. Don't be reactive. If there's anything I've struggled with as a dad is I react right away. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to jump in and fix this. And just don't particularly when your kids get to be middle school and what you and they're going through these things, to just be reactive. And it's going to happen, by the way. It's okay. It's going to happen. And you just say, hey, sorry, Dad reacted really quick. Let's just slow this down. And I want to hear from you on this.
Well, and calm dads are safe dads.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I love that. So we're going to listen in a way that lets them know that we're listening. So we're putting it on our phones. They're getting our full attention. We have to validate what they're feeling. We have to help them find the words, Research shows that girls have a bigger emotional vocabulary, but less ability to regulate. Guys have a smaller vocabulary, but better able to regulate. And I've heard before, one of the best gifts that you can give a boy is to help them identify what's going on with them, and for a girl to help to regulate with that. But
it's really good.
But we need to know what they're thinking. Even if you don't agree, even if validating and agreeing, it's not the same thing. And just saying to your kid, I can tell that you're really sad right now, and just being there with them in it, coming alongside. I'm right here. I'm right here with you. And teaching kids resilience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's another really important step for dads when we see these negative thoughts creeping in, and that is to actually model positive thinking. Your kid is going to mimic you, whether you like it or not. They listen in the car, and I know this because I've said things in the car, and I'll hear, an hour later, my 5-year-old repeat back what I said, and I thought, ooh, maybe I shouldn't do that.
This stupid cop is pulling me over.
Yeah. Again. No, but that's a great example of like, if you're lashing out at people and you're using your words, they'll hear that. But if you say it about yourself as well, that's a green light for them to say it about themselves. You got to model this positive thinking. When you have difficulty come up in your life as a dad, when you maybe have some of these negative thoughts, these dangerous thoughts, squash them in front of your kids, because if you don't, they're going to say, oh, well, clearly it's okay to, let this fester because dad let it fester. Dad, let it out in the wrong way. I can do it too. It's permission from you. And we got to model that positive thinking. Overcome your challenges. Kind of like I said earlier, we can do hard things, right?
Right.
You're having difficulty? Well, yeah, this is not great, but we can do hard things and model that sort of behavior. I think that's big for our kids. And the other thing is self-care. I mean, I know that, speak for myself, I don't know about you guys, I'm not great at self-care. I don't get the me time necessarily that I think would be beneficial. But if you're having these dangerous thoughts, that self-care, talking about encouraging your kids to kind of take a break. You're having a tough time with your math, you're having a tough time with your friends, or take a little break, and work through those things. Self-care is big. I think that's a great thing to implement into your parenting.
That's good.
So those 5 things that you pointed out, BJ, those 5 dangerous thoughts, among others, there's many other thoughts that kids battle, but those specific 5 that you mentioned in that article, I think a lot of them stem from overstimulation with media. And we mentioned social media earlier, but not just social media, movies, videos, shows, all these sort of things. Think of the last time you watched a movie where the love interest was some ugly guy. No, they're all good looking people. And so kids are watching these. My daughter loves to watch those darn Hallmark Christmas movies in July, Ted, all the time.
So sorry.
It's terrible. But it's always like the 2 most beautiful people on planet Earth falling in love, right? So in their mind, they're thinking, oh, well, only the beautiful people fall in love, or only the perfect circumstance falls in love, or it's this fairy tale thing. And so media exposure really does introduce, inadvertently probably, but it introduces these negative thoughts because comparison creeps in, or I don't look like that, or I don't sing like she does. Why should I try? Or, oh man, I'm not as big and strong as that person. I shouldn't even bother playing. All that stuff creeps in, and media exposure is dumping these expectations on kids. I think that's another thing to guard against as a dad. Watch what your kids are consuming. What kind of music are they listening to? What kind of videos are you watching with them? What kind of social media presence do they have all the time if you're letting them use it? All that stuff is an influence. All those little voices that come in, they may go out the other ear, they may stick. And you got to be aware of what might stick.
I think another thing is just kind of teaching them how to solve problems, that this is not the end of the world. Like they can think that this is it. This is how it's always going to be. I'll never forget, I'm teaching my daughter math. And I look down and I just see tears. She doesn't say anything, just the tears start coming out. And I said to her,
I do the same thing with math.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I told her. Yeah. I said, look, I know you're overwhelmed. I know this seems impossible, but it's not. Yeah. It just takes practice. I felt the exact same way. You can take a breath. It takes practice. And I literally said, this does not mean you are dumb or less intelligent than other people that get this right away. This is not something that's easy. You can overcome this, and problems at the end of the day are a good thing. They make us sharper. They make us better. They make us work harder.
A lot of the times with kids, it's just reframing it, I think. Reframe the problem. And that was the case with my son when he's great at math now, but in the beginning where we were still teaching him stuff, he was struggling with it. And basically we just rephrased the problem. It's like, oh, we're not doing 77 plus 71. We're doing Victor Hedman plus Anthony Cirelli, like the jerseys of the teams of the hockey players that he liked. And he goes, oh, dang, this is awesome. And so now he was motivated to try. It wasn't that the math changed. It was exactly the same problem, but we wrote it in such a way that he was engaged and cared. So what was a problem before now was a challenge to him. And so he just looked at it differently and he embraced it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and finally, I think, look, if it's really bad, and it's consistent and you've tried a lot of other things, I don't think this should be the first thing people turn to, but if you need to seek professional help, you seek professional help. I think there are a lot of parents that dive into that a little too quick these days, and they kind of like, well, I'll send them to therapy and then they can parent the kid rather than me stepping in. But do all these other things, and then if you're noticing that the voice has not changed, that they continue to be stuck, then I would seek out some professional people. Even if it's just, I'm going to seek out professional people to find out how I can approach this better.
Sure.
But so the exception to all of that, of course, is if your child is having suicidal ideation and they're thinking about hurting themselves, then absolutely jump into it right away.
Yeah.
Do not wait on anything like that.
Right. And where the alarm bells especially should go off, if, obviously suicide ideation, if there's any sort of a plan, that's when the alarm bells really go off. But if your kid ever talks about that, you go. And I will say, and our kids, I'm very thankful for them for letting us do this. We've had 2 kids that we've had to seek professional help. It wasn't enough. My encouragement wasn't enough. Our involvement wasn't enough. They had to deal with it. And we had people that not only helped them to deal with it, but helped us to help them, because I wanted to fix. We've talked about my daughter's panic attacks before. And the more I tried to fix, the worse it would get, the more anxiety it would cause. So please, I would rather go too quickly, because you can, but don't wait too late. Don't wait too late. Sure. It's so important. So that moves us into our pro move of the week. Just like every week, we want to give you one simple but powerful pro move. And this week is ask your kid, what is the most negative thought you have about yourself? Now, don't ask them when they're in the middle of the negative thought. Don't ask them if they're in the middle of the emotion. It's that power of the emotion where things are calmed down, where you have those moments in the car and saying, hey, I heard this podcast, and they ask a question. I'm interested to know, what's the most negative thought that you have about yourself? We may learn some things that are very, very powerful, and just to open up that conversation. And no matter what they say, you're calm and you're interested and you're concerned.
Yeah.
Right.
The more we've been talking about this, the more important I think the topic is for dads, because I kind of view these negative thoughts like cavities. Like if you don't address them, like they're just going to keep rotting and getting worse and worse and worse. Address them, help your kids get through them.
Yep. They need us. Well, thanks you guys.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for joining us. And thank you guys for listening. Hey, if you've enjoyed this podcast, will you do us a favor and just take 1 minute to go rate and review on your favorite platform? And also, if you want to learn more about us or tips and tricks, you can go into our LinkedIn profiles, which will be in the show notes. And speaking of show notes, we're going to have a lot of great resources that we want to point you to there. But most of all, we want to say thank you for joining us. We know you and your kids will be glad you did. Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis.